find me in Twitter with that handle. I work in Futures. I call my title Jack of some trades because I end up doing lots of different things. So sometimes building software, sometimes architectures, and sometimes people and teams, like in a coaching kind of role. But anyway, that's most enough from me. So why did I do this presentation? I was in a project, we were starting a new project, and we were kind of pondering whether we should use some PaaS platform or Docker, and our customer said we want to use either AWS or Azure. And then I wanted to try how my favorite stack, which is Clojure and PostgreSQL, like to build just a simple web backend. How would they handle stuff outside Heroku? And then I started fiddling around several evenings after my kids were sleeping. So this was like spanning across some time. And I didn't use the specific other PaaS services other than Heroku before, so that's why it's opinionated. So before I continue, how many of you have used Heroku? Almost all. Awesome, you're on the same page with me. How many of you have used AWS? All the same people, nice. How many of you have used Azure? Quite many. How many of you have used Google Cloud? Okay, that's good, because these are the questions that I was kind of thinking before I started. So, how much time do I need? Like, what kind of modifications do I need? What kind of abstraction level does the platform have? And how do I do all that stuff? How do I find the documentation? How ready is the platform in general for getting Clojure in? And is it free? And I mean, how long? And this is a lot of my learning experience, and thus kind of the developer experience. I'm not really an expert on most of these cloud platforms, and it's not like how to make Clojure apps production ready for the cloud, how to make security deployments, and of course I'm not comparing the full platforms here. I'm just looking into the app level basically, and how to connect to database. And of course I know that my tech selection is not the most native to all the platforms, so some issues might arise from there. And now I would invite you to make this session like a, two-directional, because I don't know all the shit here, and there's most certainly more proficient people here. So please shout out when you know things more than me, and let's learn together. Because I might have gotten something wrong. So I started by getting the Heroku example app for Clojure. And so making something a bit less trivial than Hello World, because if I would just deploy Hello World, it probably would work pretty easily. So just some database operations that I can see that database works, I get data in, data out. And then I forked it, and on that repository there is also kind of how I deployed it on the different platforms so that it should be kind of reproducible.
Sorry, just that one second.
What? So I guess this doesn't serve
it works, yeah.
How it works?
I thought I heard something now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Clear.
Thanks for shouting anyways.
Yeah, I can keep on shouting. Anyway, so here's just basically what it means. What are the PaaS things on different platforms? So Heroku is Heroku, that's what it is. It's a PaaS. AWS, in there I use the Elastic Beanstalk. In Azure, the App Service, and in Google Cloud, the App Engine. And of course, the same applies for the databases. So there's the standard stuff. And in Microsoft Azure, PostgreSQL was in beta when I did this last year. It was a bit before the summer actually, so it's a bit, things might have changed already. So, as you all know, Heroku, you know how it goes. They are, sorry, sure.
Did you use the Google App Engine flexible or standard? Flexible should be like a Docker based, and standard is like you choose a language. And
The standard then, because I didn't use Docker in any phase of this. Yes, good point. I should add that there. Yeah. So Heroku, as you all have, basically almost all of you have used it. So it's really, really nice to get started, and you have each technology has their own article and you have an example app. So basically it just takes a few minutes to get started. In AWS, I of course had used AWS before, but not Elastic Beanstalk. So I had to skim some documentation. I think it's quite verbose in AWS. But the good fact, in my opinion, is that it's really up to date. So it's pretty easy to kind of understand, okay, this is here, I can apply it directly. So it took me a half an hour to get my jar file deployed and setting up the RDS and configuring the access to it. So a bit longer than Heroku, but not that painful. Then in Azure, I saw that, okay, the documented reference app is in Node, and the Java thing is using Eclipse on the Java Quick Start. I didn't want to use Eclipse. I didn't want to get back 10 years in my, or 15 years, I don't remember when I used it last time. And then the problem was that the documentation was so scattered. I don't know if you have better ideas how to do it better, but I found that it was really hard to find the stuff there. And sometimes I even found like a documentation that had a screenshot of the Azure portal that didn't match what I saw in the web. So then I later heard from our Azure experts that Azure is developing really fast, so they just didn't always keep the documentation up to date. Okay, that sucks. It took me 4 hours to learn it, so I think it was several nights then, and a few hours to get the app actually deployed and database set up. So kind of, I would roughly say, with AWS experience but no Azure experience, it had like roughly half workday, maybe even whole workday of getting stuff working. On Google Cloud, I think their guides were pretty nice. It was easy to follow. It was kind of step-by-step wizard in the console to get it up and running. I had to make the changes. So the database connector, they are using their own driver for the database. And since I had pretty simple application, it almost doubled my application size. So my jar was like exploding. And then I had to put this app engine web XML in and do configurations there. And I think most of my time was like figuring out the Java version dependency things, because of, I think the database driver needed different Java version, and then the default Google App Engine didn't offer just that Java version, and then I had to kind of find out, okay, how do I change that?
I would like to very much know which of these were configured in your source repository and which of these you kind of did some configuration by hand in the administration user interfaces.
Yeah, basically, I will get to the kind of, that's actually the next slide.
Okay, yeah.
So this was more like about the documentation and how it felt to get started. I'll get back to that. You're always so ahead of everything.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So basically, it took several hours in Google. I didn't time that, like, mark my time there. So I would say something in between Azure and AWS. So and getting the first deployment in was pretty easy when I kind of got the gist of it. Any comments? Other comments? No? So you maybe agree on some level. So the actual deployment then, of course, everybody knows Git push Heroku master is the best thing since sliced bread. And since that the fact being that Heroku takes care of your build, so you don't have to do anything locally and you don't have to kind of figure out stuff. And it took like 58 seconds when I did it several times. I didn't like measure the times that many times. There might be, of course, variation depending on load here and there. Shoot.
Did you any migrations for the database running there? Or?
No, it was super simple. You can actually check my source code from GitHub, but it's basically, if it finds the database and there's nothing there, it just, you know, creates the database. And if it's there, then it does nothing. So I didn't use a migration script. But of course, that would take more time. And that's a really good point. It would be like even making it a bit more hard for the platform if I would use that. So in AWS, I was, so here's the big difference. I had to make the build. Of course, I guess you can do it with the code build, like remotely. You can also have AWS do the build, but I wanted to, you know, stay on just evaluating the PaaS side here in a way. And then I found out the EB CLI command, which was pretty fast to use. So basically, running these two commands would take me just a bit tiny longer than in Heroku. So in a kind of roughly, I felt pretty it felt really good. And then in Azure, there's different ways to make the deployment. And already when I presented this before, somebody asked me like, why the hell did you use this uploading zip method? It's not the best one, but that's the only one that I actually got pretty easily working. I think I tried to kind of make the Git integration, but then it wanted to have read permission to all my GitHub repositories, and I didn't want to do that either. So if you know how to make this easier, please do tell. But how I did was that, okay, I made the WAR file, and since I knew that this zip uploading wants to have the WAR file archived in zip, then I uploaded that, and then there was this pretty cumbersome thing that I had to sometimes figure out in the Azure portal that it had the earlier version, and I had to kind of delete some stuff to get it up and running. But anyway, when I really did it fast, it took me about 3 minutes. So it was kind of painful, but still it worked. Any comments?
It's fine to give the read since GitHub, Microsoft already owns GitHub.
Yeah, that's true now, yes, that's very much true. Okay, I have to migrate to GitLab, thanks. I can then continue ranting. But anyway, so Google Cloud has a bit similar story. They want to have a WAR file there, but you have to put stuff inside the WAR file, so you have to actually unzip your WAR file, and yeah, the app CFJ wants to actually have an unzipped WAR file, so that's how it works. And then you put your App Engine web file inside there, and the second command is kind of migrating the traffic one from the earlier deployment version to the new one. So that's actually a pretty nice feature in Google Cloud, that by default you have all the different deployment versions, and you can kind of pretty easily switch between which one gets the traffic. And I think you can. It's a nice rolling deployments, and if you have several nodes, you can like see how much traffic each node gets and so on. But this weird thing about Google Cloud was that I got a lot of error messages when I was running it, and it took 16 minutes. What the hell? So when I first ran it, I thought that it doesn't work at all, because it gave really many error messages, and then it had to retry, but in the end it worked. So there was some weird bugs. I don't know, the people here, do you have experienced similar stuff? Yes? No?
I don't know, it's getting better over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that was really, really weird. So it kind of worked, it felt good when it worked, and the console looked like the web UI looked nice, but the command line experience was like scary. So environment variables, Heroku, you use the command line interface, and it's easy. AWS, it's almost similar, equal. In Azure, I didn't find out any other way than doing it via the portal. And then in Google Cloud, you had to put them inside the XML file, which goes inside your unzipped WAR file. So it was pretty cumbersome. Since, I mean, you're actually doing a deployment if you want to change your WAR, like environment variables. So it's a bit weird thing. And then the costs. So Heroku is pretty nice because it kind of never stops working if you use the free dynos. It's just, of course, it stops working after 30 minutes, but the point is that you don't have to pay for it. It works even like after 2 years, I guess. They're still sleeping there, and then you can get them up and running. And you have some limitations in the PostgreSQL, but I think these are pretty nice if you just try out stuff. Whereas all the other ones, basically you have a certain time limit on how long it is free, and then it starts acquiring costs. So in AWS, you don't pay for the Elastic Beanstalk level, you pay for the EC2 instances, so the infrastructure that is running actually behind the scenes. And if you take the smallest EC2 instance, you get basically 1 full month of the free tier use, and the same applies for the smallest database instance. And of course, you have a bit similar limitations, but it's pretty nice. In Azure, you have 170 euros in Finland for the first 30 days of some services and 12 months for some selected free service. So for the free app service, you get 10 web apps on Windows. I guess they don't offer that much free on Linux. Surprise, surprise. And then again, you have it actually more RAM than on the other platforms, which is nice. And the PostgreSQL was free only for 1 month, and then it's pretty expensive. And that was in beta last year. I don't know if it's now like production ready, whatever it means there. The weird difference between the platforms here was that Azure started spamming me quite a lot on kind of you need to upgrade to paid plan. And after the free month, I started seeing kind of things breaking down in the portal. So I guess there was a reason why they wanted me to go to the paid plan, because in addition to the app not working anymore, I couldn't even get kind of things working in the portal, in the web portal. And in Google Cloud, there's different amount of credit, but of course there's different amount of cost as well. But basically you get the, you can use 1 instance free, and then if you have like 2 instances that are not running all the time, you can like 28 instance hours free per day. But anyway, and PostgreSQL you can also use quite long before it hits the limit. So everything is at least 1 month usable free. And the cold start, so in Heroku you have cold start. It means that it takes a bit longer to get it up and running when it's kind of hibernated. So waiting for the JVM start and so on takes about half a minute. Database is pretty quick. In AWS you don't have the cold start because you're paying for the EC2, or in the free tier you're not paying, but the EC2 is all the time running, so that's nice. Also in the database there is no cold start. In Azure you have a bit over 1 minute cold start. In Google Cloud you don't, and then you have a database cold start. So pretty similar, not big differences. This is now the kind of more opinionated part. So in my opinion, Heroku is kind of the how it should be in a way. It kind of feels very modern, it's easy to use, it's very simple, and the platform is very well abstracted. So you don't actually know what operating system is there or how they orchestrate stuff, and I kind of love it. Some people might not like it, but I mean, as long as things work, I think this is how it should be. In AWS, everything is very verbose. You know, sometimes AWS consoles on web are kind of semi-modern, sometimes they're not that modern, but I felt that it was pretty easy to use the Elastic Beanstalk, but many operations take a lot of time, so it kind of feels sluggish in my opinion. But the command line interface is pretty easy to use. And they pretty well also show the platform and the operating systems that are behind the scenes, so you can see what there is, but you don't. I didn't have to touch anything there, so I felt that it were all pretty well automated. But then again, in Microsoft Azure, I felt that UI was, I think that was the most different from all of them. So that was, in my opinion, very old style and also very sluggish. I haven't used it like in some 4 months, so maybe it has improved. But it was, in my opinion, the slowest one to use in as a whole. It was pretty hard to kind of also find the right places, in my opinion, there. And then the funny fact I also already mentioned before, that so from the web portal you can easily get the command line access to your server, but I actually had to use it because in some deployment stage there was this thing that, you know, it's Windows, so it had locked the WAR file. There's a Tomcat running the WAR file, and the new WAR file wouldn't get run before I deleted the old, so I had to go CD something and tell something, and it's like frustrating that I have to actually know that it's a Windows to be able to operate it, so it does not make sense. So it's not well abstracted. And in Google Cloud I felt that the abstraction was really good, so I didn't have to look under the hood in Google, and I felt that the whole web console was really modern and nice to use. And also in Google Cloud you can easily get the command line access directly from the web console, but I didn't have any reason to use it. The only bad thing, in my opinion, in the developer experiences or the look and feel in Google Cloud was that the CLI script was really confusing. It was really hard to tell if it worked or not, because there were so many error messages. So as a summary, Heroku is easy, fast, simple, and predictable. AWS feels, in my opinion, like enterprisey kind of big thing. but it's also, it felt very robust. I couldn't kind of break it down that easily. Complicated but well documented. Whereas Azure, in my opinion, had a bit of old-fashioned feeling. So enterprisey as well, but like different kind of enterprises. AWS also complicated, and for me it was the hardest to learn from these four. And Google Cloud felt really modern and easy to use, not that complicated, but then on the command line buggy. Now it would be really cool if you could, you know, challenge me. Are you like on the same line here or not?
I think you could try Google Cloud again because they're integrating more and more stuff inside their G Cloud command line thing.
Yeah.
And they have very many releases. Like they release really often, so it's really getting better over time. Like we started using Google Cloud 1.5 years ago, and it's like it has improved visibly.
Cool. Somebody else wanted to say something?
Yeah, regarding the AWS, these days you could also deploy Docker images through the Elastic Beanstalk.
Yes, yes.
So regarding what you have done, it would be terrific to do it as a longitudinal study, repeat it every year and see how the platforms develop as like the gateway drug to more complicated deployment setups.
Yeah, definitely Docker. So as a kind of a side note to the backstory is that we actually ended up using Docker, and we deployed it in ECS, the Elastic Container Service, and we loved it a lot. So I didn't end up using these things, but it would be really interesting to do the stuff on Docker and then compare. But I'm actually assuming that it's more straightforward with Docker because you're already having an abstraction layer in between, whereas here you're kind of closer to the platform in a sense.
Yeah, Docker abstracts a lot.
Yes.
That's probably the reason why everyone is giving a platform to run
Yes.
it on, because it works the same.
And actually before last year, before I did this, and before our project ended up using Clojure and Docker, I thought that I want to use this and not Docker. Then we did it with Docker. I was like, oh, this is amazing. This works and everything is cool, and I don't even have to know about these things that I stumbled here. And I'm like, hey, I probably don't want to do this anymore. I want to sleep. So, well, next steps, I need to learn more, yes. And I also was surprised how much time it took to kind of try to, you know, do all these platforms at once, and then I was always confused, like, oh, what's bugging where? And of course, there's the other aspects as well. So of course, for example, our customers might not be that interested in the developer experience. They might be more interested in security aspects or whatever. And then also other cloud platforms. Have you tried them out? There's Alibaba, there's Oracle, there's IBM. I haven't heard anyone using them, but I know that some companies in Finland, I think Efficode is an Alibaba partner, so I guess that is.
And I think Seal is doing something with Oracle, so we could set up something.
Yeah.
At least we used to have like a megabucks of credits to use, so we could have some kind of collaboration on that.
I'm guessing that Oracle and IBM will run a JVM, so you could run Clojure pretty I think.
Easily.
I actually looked into Alibaba and found out that their PaaS offering was a bit different. When I looked it last year, there was like WordPress PaaS kinds of things.
They have data centers in Europe.
Yes, they have. At least last year they had one in Frankfurt, but that was the only one in Europe. But yeah.
I mean, before Google had a data center in Hamina. The closest one was Frankfurt as well. So.
Yeah, yeah.
From my point of view, the strength of Heroku is partially that the whole environment is set up from the source code repository
Yes.
and the CLI. Is it the same with these other platforms that also the database is set up that you can use the command line tools to set it up, or are there phases where you have to go to the administration, the web consoles?
You can use tools. So in AWS you can use CloudFormation or Terra
That's true.
or other tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like in a real non-testing environment, when you would like make a real project, it makes always sense to use infrastructure as a code. So maybe Tau, yes.
Yeah.
or Terraform or whatever.
I mean, we use Cloud to generate Terraform and Kubernetes and whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah. And in our project, we ended up using Terraform, and I think it was super nice. Of course, there was one reason was that we ended up using AWS, and we kind of was worrying that, oh, okay, maybe the customer at some point says that they want to migrate everything to Azure, and we kind of thought, okay, let's pick Terraform, then we at least theoretically have the possibility to switch, even though it probably would still make, mean a complete rewrite.
But I'm kind of worried that you get going fast with the CLIs like EB, and then maybe if you are actually doing some infrastructure as a code, then you have to switch over to some totally different tool. So if it's kind of, it's probably pretty easy to get something up and running, but then when there's some kind of environment and actual dependencies, then you might need something totally different anyways. I don't know, because I don't know how long these kind of setup niceties will take you with different cloud platforms. But
Yeah, at least you can use the command line tools to debug, and when you are there, that you can set up everything with, let's say, Terraform. Then you can like switch stuff, like okay, it doesn't work. Let's see what happens with the EV or whatever.
yeah, okay.
But I guess this was all things that I wanted to say. Any comments? Any questions? What's the time?
Yeah, we have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah. I hope you learned something. I learned a ton when I did this, and yeah, I would maybe the slide that is missing here that I didn't yet know when I made the presentation for the first time would be like maybe select Docker instead of these would be the biggest learning for me last year. Yeah, thanks.
I still have one question. Do you think that it gives a good return on investment to ever try different platforms? Like, is it better to just stick with one because it's so much work to try them out all? How would you assess the kind of value of trying them out?
Well, now you're asking the guy who just said that I'm not an expert on all the platforms.
Yeah.
There's probably better experts here.
Yeah, but you
okay,
are.
my opinion after this was that probably the platforms are competing all the time, and if you want to have the kind of edge and take the fastest, okay, who has the newest AI automation thingy, then you just pick the newest one, try the newest one, and if you want to really stay on the edge, then it makes sense to try the different things. But if you're just deploying basic web apps with Clojure, then it might not pay off, because I don't think the Clojure stuff is moving that fast there. It's just who has the nicest JVM things.
Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't get so much support from Clojure community. I think there was a very nice blog post. I should have linked it from the what are the guys in Jyväskylä, Flova guys. They had used Google Cloud with Clojure, and even though their blog post was already outdated and didn't work one-on-one, it still helped me understand how the hell things work. So, but there was some Elastic Beanstalk plugins for Lightning, and those didn't just work for me. I don't know. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Whoa.